So, had a brief chat with Matt earlier today, refreshing memory of how we met, and since we've spoke, I went through my emails. I never delete anything, and I'm pretty sure I saw you pitch in about February 2014.
Right.
So it was when West Tech Fest was early in the year, so just after that.
Yeah.
Lars Rasmussen was there, Aurelius Digital dinner at Must Wine Bar.
Yes, I think so.
Yep. And you were there with your co-founder telling the story about 8 Mobile.
Yes.
I think you'd been launched for a while, you'd secured some big customers, and you were looking for your first investment at that point to sort of grow things.
Yeah, which went very easily and
so can we
without
maybe
any pain.
Wind back a little bit, and 8 Mobile was how you got into Nifty.
Yes.
So can we start with, well, who is Matt Edwards and why is he doing... So 8 Mobile, well, I'll let you explain what 8 Mobile is and how if we can maybe explore how you got there.
Sure, yeah. I'll keep a very brief history. So I started out as a kid in construction, specifically in building technologies. So control systems, it's kind of sexy now. It's the Internet of Things these days. Back then it was just boring old controls, hated by all builders because we were always the last ones on the job trying to get things working. I was born in the UK and worked my way up from being a kid, an apprentice essentially, or a trainee, up to being the national manager for Siemens in the UK, Siemens Building Technologies. Went on quite a few businesses, merged those businesses into the UK entity and spent a lot of time doing process improvement and got a fairly good reputation for project execution. I hit the age of 30, decided I was going to go travelling for a year, wanted to give up my job. I'd split up from my fiance and I just needed a change, and so I restructured the company one last time and didn't give myself a job. And the Swiss headquarters for that business gave me a call and said, "Hey, I hear you're making yourself redundant. Do you want to come and work for us? You still get to go travelling, but you get to do it in business class."
Wow.
Oh, okay.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, so I moved to Switzerland and lived there for the next few years, travelled around the world, working on projects in the US, a few European countries, Singapore, Hong Kong, and my final project was actually restructuring the Australian business, where I met my wife. There.
This is how we get foreigners.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So we had a kind of 6-month long distance relationship, flying back and forwards from Switzerland to Australia. We were in Melbourne at the time. She's a Perth girl originally, and so we moved to Melbourne, and I started APE as a consulting company, and literally just got to Melbourne and didn't know what to do. And I said, "Well, what do you want to do?" I thought, "Well, what I was doing before you made me give up my job." So I started APE as a consulting company and was helping companies look at how they tender their projects and how they execute their projects, which was kind of my field of expertise. And eventually she got her own way and we moved to Perth at the start of 2012. It was actually September 2011. Right. And that's the exact moment I had the idea for 8 Mobile.
Right, okay. So what is 8 Mobile?
So 8 Mobile...
Or should I say, what was 8 Mobile?
Yeah, so 8 Mobile was and is a paperless site app essentially. It at the time, I think I'd just bought myself an iPad 2. Actually, I'd given up smoking. I'd managed to go 6 months, and the treat for myself was to buy myself an iPad. And as soon as I got the iPad, I was just kind of, it's crazy. I was consulting with a fit out company here in Perth, just helping them with some tendering stuff. And just noticed their guys were coming in the office or filling in RFIs, filling in field paperwork. And I just thought, well, I've got an iPad. Why aren't you doing that on an iPad? And when we looked into it, it was really because they had ISO accreditation. It was really hard for them to transition away from that into a digital platform. So it just everything that I looked into for them to see if we could enable them to use the iPads just wasn't practical or wasn't in any way, either wasn't user-friendly, it wasn't easy to use, or would involve a massive change process of re-accreditation through ISO. So I thought, well, why not do it myself. And this is where I didn't really think I had a startup. I just kind of had a developer, and we were just going to make a bit of an app, and I was going to help these guys go digital. And it was.
So this was going to be a consulting tool for you.
Yeah, it was something for me to sell alongside consulting, and really spent a whole year not even realising I had a startup, and I was an idiot. I was really very quite naive at the time.
Who were the first customers you were trying to get to use this app?
So originally, it was, I guess, those kind of customers I was working with at the time, which kind of fit out companies, engineering firms, not necessarily the big first-tier builders, but more of the subcontract base, or just general contractors that are smaller, mid-size, that had this kind of, didn't have an IT department, but wanted to get the benefits of digital.
So what were the primary benefits that you were delivering to them? What was changing in their business?
So much, I guess, and in simple terms, no longer using paper, using an iPad, which was much quicker and faster to use.
So they didn't have to doing the data entry direct rather than a bit of paper that goes to someone who has to enter it in.
Yeah, absolutely, and it doesn't get lost, and also giving them the ability to get hold of that data and do something with it rather than having to manually enter it. And that was the vision. And that's kind of pretty much still what it does. We had probably grander visions at the start, where it was going to be an all-encompassing everything you needed out on site. But I
think that might have been the pitch that I heard.
It may well have been, yeah. So and it still has a really cool drawings capability for the site plan drawings. But the reality is that there's some other startups that only did that and did it better.
Right.
You know, which you got to be honest. So it does drawings well enough for the kind of customers that Ape. I'm going to get that wrong all night.
Yeah.
I still get that wrong in meetings quite a lot. The drawings it handles, it does well enough for the kind of customer base it has. Right. But if you're a general contractor, there's much better tools than that for doing.
Yeah.
For using
drawings. So back to 2014 then.
Yes.
I think you had a couple of customers, some pretty big construction ones from what I can recall.
Yeah, that we had back in, so very brief history, 2012, 2nd of January 2012 when we started coding. It took us 2 years to get some customers. We had a few false starts where we thought we'd hit sufficient capability. Giorgio were our first customer, but that, the idea that you release a product too early, well, we released it too early and it didn't really work. So we had to kind of walk away from that client in the end. Right. But we then found a few construction companies came on board. But the really where it kicked in is where we found a road building company who spray asphalt on roads, and they had these really, really complex requirements. And I guess one of the great lessons I think from that experience was the best thing we ever did in 8 Mobile was when we sat down with a customer who shared with us the problem they were having, how they'd tried to solve it, and we were like, oh man, we're so close to fixing that for you, give me a month. And we went away and developed some software, came back and fixed their problems for them. Right. And they became our largest customer. That's Colas, which is
and they're still your customer?
Still a customer, yes. Nationally rolled it out. So we started with the WA office, and then they sold it internally throughout the company for us. And now Ape has kind of focused in on quite a lot of those other road builders who have similar kind of complex requirements.
So when we met, you were pitching for investment to a room full of mostly not investors, as sometimes happens in Perth.
Yeah.
Well, it was a new group that had been formed. There were some investors, but angel investment in groups was quite young. And this is, Perth Angels. Wasn't called Perth Angels. It was Western WA Angel Investors. And they'd only really just getting started as well.
Yeah.
So, how you ended up securing some angel investment about that time?
No, we bootstrapped all the way up to the Aurelius dinner. We did the OzApps. We were finalists in the West Tech Fest OzApp Awards, and really used that to relaunch a capital raising exercise at that point, and that was successful. So we'd tried to raise capital a lot before then and failed, and it was really on the back of we started to get some really great growth. The OzApps gave us a nice bit of publicity and kind of validation from the community to kind of say, yeah, this is an interesting thing that they're doing, and then we managed to raise a kind of Series A at that point.
So what sort of size were you looking at?
Well, it was a Series A from back then, not a today Series A, but yeah. So we raised 2 million then, and it all up the business has raised 5.5 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the other raise, was that one other round after that? Or
Two other rounds after that. So
Okay.
so there was the initial round and another 2 million, then a 1.5 after that.
Okay, so that first 2 million that you got in, that was basically to enable you to pay your team or to expand your team, or?
Yeah, so at that point we had 4 people. There was myself and my co-founder, and there was 2 guys just working sweat for equity. And
Right.
I'd kind of said to them, look, I'm gonna get investment, I'm pretty sure. Can you do a couple of months until it closes? I was sure I was going to get it at the time, or I was pretty confident at that point.
And those guys are still working for 8 now?
Yes, they're still working for it, and they got their equity and etc. Yeah.
Yeah. So your company is now Nifty that you focus on. And Nifty emerged from something you were working on in Ape.
Yeah,
Can
the
you
idea.
maybe
Yeah.
talk through what you did in Ape that?
Yeah, so when we had the initial idea back in 2012, going paperless was a big idea, and it was a big challenge. By I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago, we got to the point where thinking, like, we've got all this huge amount of data our customers are collecting in our system. Some of them had said to them, look, we really need to kind of get like a summary of this bit of information. If only my supervisors knew that this was on track as they're going, that would really help us. But currently, it kind of comes through our system, goes into another system, and then they can kind of get a dashboard from there. But it was just a bit too clunky. Yeah, so we never did anything on reporting. We were really conscious at the time. When I started, we didn't want to be a dashboarding software. There's tons of dashboarding things out there, and we didn't want to do it, which was probably a mistake in hindsight. We probably should have put a bit more in there. But we wanted to be the best at capturing data and putting it into other systems rather than. I just thought, oh man, we're going to make crappy dashboards compared to some of the really great ones that are out there. Right, okay. So we were scratching our heads to kind of say, how can we add more value to our customers? What can we deliver that's more than just capturing your data? How can we achieve that pain? And we had the idea. We set up a little skunk works within Ape to kind of say, what can we do? Let's take this out of the normal dev flow. Me and a couple of other guys, we just said we've got permission to play around for a little while and see what we can come up with. And one of the ideas we had was just asking, literally just talking to the app and saying, how much concrete have we poured today? And it being able to answer you back. So that was the idea of answering a question, going away, interrogating the data and coming back, which is based on the idea of a basic query, essentially, and taking the sentence, turning that into a database query, and then just giving a visual answer. So Ape couldn't speak to you, but it could understand some things that you would say, and then we could allow people to configure things they were interested in. So for the asphalting companies, often it's like what's the square meterage of spray, what's the amount of asphalt we've used, how much binder have we used, how much of this have we used today, this week, this month, those kind of things.
So when you started doing that, you were using sort of off the shelf or the services available like through your AWS or? Yeah,
so we used the kind of on-device voice to text, and then to process the text, we used a thing called NLP compromise, which by the virtue of its name kind of gives away that it can do some things, but it can't do everything.
Yeah, you call your product Compromise. Yeah.
But what it enables is you to do some limited things really well, and that was perfect for the problem we had. Yeah. We wanted to be able to understand in a word, in a sentence, the word concrete and the time frame. Concrete and this week or today or in the last hour or this month. That's all we needed to do and grab that. And NLP Compromise is perfect for that kind of thing. It's a really great tool if you want to get a very simple and quick kind of voice activated system.
You've got a limited parameter of the sort of questions that will be asked, and you can answer those well. Yes,
and so you've got limited parameters in there, and the context of what you say is limited, and it's not a self-learning model. So it's really great It's based on a whole bunch of data, but it doesn't grow, it doesn't improve. It is what it is. And so that was perfect for that execution. But that got me really excited.
Did your customers like that, presumably?
Yeah, they did. A very odd thing came about, and I don't know exactly where it is now, but what we found is people were using it, but maybe once a month. They were often doing it for their monthly reports, and we were kind of hoping to get daily engagement out of it. And also people were loving it to demo to people. But they weren't necessarily just like, look, I could
our system is.
Yeah, so one customer actually came back and they said it had gone, the whole system had paid for itself in one conversation because this guy in front of them was telling them how this work was done, or there was that basically this mechanical contractor was telling us that he was being accused of delaying the project. So he just did a search and said, how many delays have we had this month?
No.
And no, how many delays had the customer caused them? Yeah. And he came up with a whole list of them and said, look, here's how many delays. So the argument was put out, the fire was put out in the instant because they could get that instant answer back. So there was some power in that, but it is in that kind of once a month I might use it, or in that kind of, right, now I need to tell you to shut up. I'm going to ask a question, prove it to you that you're wrong, rather than this kind of daily engagement that
But you got really excited in the possibilities of it.
Yeah, exactly. I just thought, well, what if you could use the power and simplicity of voice? That just, it is extraordinarily powerful if someone can just talk to an app, it can understand them and it can action what they do. And even more so, if you can then take that further and act on someone's behalf, because I can now talk construction, the kind of the power, the possibilities are almost endless with that. Now that wasn't something I could really explore within the confines of Ape. It was on a mission to do what it was doing. So it was something that would require a different entity, different funding model, a different kind of experience and customer base.
Nifty came along, but you were the boss of another company.
Yes.
So how did you get out of being the boss of that company and get into Nifty and keep everything on an even keel there, or keep growing? Or
well, the one reason in reality I could do that is because we had a great management team in Ape. So Ape, we'd hired really well, particularly the management team, absolutely second to none. And when we looked at Ape and what we would need to do, we wanted to trim some costs down and get on a path to profitability. So in order to do that, I needed to trim a little bit of the organisation out and refocus in on what it was really good at, which was roads. So we wanted to just focus in on the market, focus in the product on that area.
And that was, from our chat earlier, that was in Australia rather than...
Yeah, so we'd had an experiment overseas, and we'd realised a couple of things. It's really, really hard to manage a team overseas if you're not going to go over there yourself and spend the time there. So we had trouble doing that. It was really difficult. And secondly, it takes a hell of a lot of money to crack America, with the particular kind of sales model that say a business like Ape has. See, I'm going to keep doing it. Which is that kind of direct customer interaction. We've got to sell a customer, we've got to go and demonstrate it to them, we've got to help them set it up and do that. So with that kind of medium touch sales interaction, it's just really hard to do from a distance. So we just said, let's focus in on Australia, focus in on the area we're very successful in, and really haven't found anyone who can really compete with us.
We've got a lot of roads here as well, I think, don't we?
There's a lot of roads, there's a lot of, and there's also a lot of safety regulation here in Australia that doesn't exist in say, places like America.
So more documentation.
Yeah, so there's a higher bar set for companies who operate here, and we can meet those standards here better. So it seemed like a logical thing for Ape to kind of focus in, become a profitable business rather than a startup that's just burning cash, which is, startups we're really good at that, burning cash. So we wanted to do that. And really when you look at that and say, well, okay, so we're not going to be developing new product ideas. What we really need is a gun head of technology, and we really need a gun salesperson. So it kind of left, out of 3 managers in the business, it left me, well, I'm not the best technology guy and I'm not the best salesperson. So the thing for me to do is to step out and let those guys run the business. So I'm still on the board, I still support the business as much as I possibly can, but it just seemed the best thing for the business was actually to keep those other 2 guys there rather than me.
Yeah.
Which...
So the Nifty came about because you were at a loose end, or you engineered yourself out of the business because of Nifty? And we'll come to what Nifty is all about in a moment as well.
Yeah, a bit of from column A and a bit from column B, I guess. Look, in reality, I had to look at, and I have a responsibility as a director of the business to do what's right for Ape.
Yeah, well, you probably have a reasonably big shareholding in it still as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm invested in making it a success. So there was a have to really be harsh on yourself and say, am I the best man for this job now? And I'd said to my co-founder, I'd said to our investors when they first came on, the moment I'm not the right person to run this, I will happily step out of it. And I truly believe that you're not always the right person for the job, and you should always try and make yourself redundant. My career through being a kid on the tools, through being the national manager for Siemens Building Technologies in the UK was because every 18 months I managed to make myself redundant, and that left me available for a promotion. Whereas I saw a lot of people in those kind of businesses that were so good at their job and so good at their niche that they could never be promoted because you can't afford to lose that guy from that role. How the hell are we going to do that engineering if that guy becomes the manager? And that guy probably shouldn't be the manager because he loves the engineering too much. Yeah. So there was an element of really I'm not the best fit, and there was an element of I'm so excited by the possibilities of this thing that maybe I could kind of do it again. Maybe I can go back to the very, very start and reapply all the lessons I've learned.
So along comes Nifty.
Yes.
So separate entity?
Yes.
I noticed from your LinkedIn that you're actually not based in Australia. You're in the US. Yeah. Well,
I commute to commute between San Francisco and here. So I still live here. My child goes to daycare here. Yeah. We probably will move to the US in the next kind of 6 months or so. I'm holding it off as long as I possibly can, because if you've ever been to San Francisco, it's awful. It's probably I think it's Armageddon. I hate the place. So,
okay.
And I tweet that, so it's not. You don't need to not say that. It is a horrible place.
So, and I think you mentioned you've got. The team at Nifty is you and your co-founder?
Yeah, so we're based here, and the plan is to really set up the sales office over in the US and keep the development here in Australia.
So what are you selling?
Human workflow automation is how we describe it. Mm-hmm. So the basic concept is we have this ability to talk to human beings, and we have this ability to talk to human beings very specifically in the context of not just construction, and we understand construction words, but also the very specifics of that project. So on each individual construction project, there are really weird and wonderful location names. There's really weird and wonderful location part numbers and names. There's vendors with ridiculous names, and there's people with ridiculous names. And none of those things Siri or Google has a chance of getting right in any way accurate when you talk to it. But we can, because we can pull all that context into our models. So we can integrate into your project management system. So our first partner is Procore, which is the US's #1 project management system, about 2.5 million users over there. If you're familiar with construction over here, they're the A-Connects over there, but it's a much broader system.
Right.
So yeah, we can pull all this context in and provide a voice application. First of all, is where we give that away for free. So we have this free voice application where you can talk to it and say, hey, Joe Bloggs over here had 5 guys on site for 8 hours. They were doing the first fix electrical up on level 1, and it will understand that. So from that sentence, it can say, so you're trying to log some manpower in the daily log for today, just from that. And so we figure out the intent. And then from there, we'll say, okay, so the vendor name is this, the number of workers was this, the number of hours was this, the location was this, and this is the description of the activity they did today. And when we can log that into Procore for the user. So rather than them having to enter it manually, which is an area I've got a bit of experience with, but we want to kind of step away from that, you can just talk to it and do that.
So this is prompted by the system to remind the...
So that's where the automation side comes in. So first of all, we give a free app away that has this ability to talk to people, to understand what you say and log information.
So they just dial into the computer.
Yeah, you load an app, you log in with your Procore account, and just start talking to it. And so it'll say, hey, which project do you want to use? And you tell it, log into this project. And then here's your daily briefing for today. What do you want to do? I want to log a timesheet. Log 8 hours in my time card for me today. Okay, great, I've done that. And that's the kind of conversation it has with you, and takes very complex inputs. So I'm not a fan of chatbots, by the way. So we essentially are a very complex chatbot, but I think they're extremely inefficient. I want to log manpower. Oh, okay. How many hours would you like to log? I'd like to log 8, please. How many people did you have? We had 5. What were you doing today? Oh, that time I could have filled in on a UI, so it's not actually 10 times better than the status quo.
It's just a new way of being annoyed by your
software. Yeah, exactly. So we want to avoid. We wanted to very much avoid that, which is why we had to build very complex models to understand very long sentences. So saying it out loud is really quick and easy to do. From the user's point of view. But then that capability gives us the ability to say, well, instead of you phoning all your vendors and asking them that question, how many people did you have on site today, and you logging that information, which is what happens most of the projects, why don't we reach out to them and do that for you? So we start off with SMS because it simplifies things a fair bit for us.
I'm a contractor. I receive an SMS that asks, gives me a prompt to just phone up and say what it is that I've done.
Yeah, so even just reply on SMS. So you could, it'll send a message to them and say, hey, I'm Nifty, Matt from such and such contractor, needs your manpower for the day. You can just reply naturally, and it gives them a kind of clue on how to reply. And they can reply and say, oh, we had 8 guys for 5 hours on here and here and here, and it'll figure out. Or they could say, bugger off, and we'll respond as a chatbot would and kind of say, hey, no, I really do need it. How many guys did you have? We had 5. And then it can take you through the questions, but it can all be achieved in kind of one sentence as well. And that came about because we gave the free app away, and we figured, right, what level are we going to monetize this business? And the original thought was answering questions wasn't something we can charge for. But we would charge for when we log data for you. So the idea, we do something for you, then you pay for it. But we kind of realized that even talking to an app and us logging it for you actually wasn't 10 times better than the status quo. And that's the kind of bar you've got to get to, I think, to have a really successful startup. So we said, well, why don't we give that away, and it helps train our models. So you can have this app and you can talk to it, and it'll log information over in this other system for you based on a conversation. But if we do that work for you, if we go and phone up all your subcontractors, have a conversation with them, and rather than you spend an hour every day doing that, we do it for you. Exactly, yeah. Now it's 10 times better than the status quo if I don't have to do it at all. Yeah. That's our basic theory. And then they start comparing the cost of you to the cost of having someone in the office doing that. Exactly, yeah. So this activity, and I talk from our US-based construction companies. It's their superintendents, their supervisors that are one of the highest paid people out on the site, who's having to phone all their subbies, have a chat with them, find out what they're doing. And they identified it. We surveyed them, and they identified this is our biggest pain every day that we do. So we could broaden that out to what's our kind of overarching theory. This is just one automation that we've built where we go out and fetch the manpower logs, bring it back, you approve it, and we write it into Procore. Mm-hmm. But our theory is that there are millions of conversations happening every day on construction sites that we can automate, and they are repetitive and they are of low value. Now, it's not to say that you get rid of human interaction, because one of the things that makes construction magic is a lot of things are just sorted out on site and the interactions happen. But a lot of those conversations are just a ball ache. Are you going to be here tomorrow? Where were you yesterday? Did you get that bit fixed? Did this happen? Are you ready for this bit to happen? And one of the examples I kind of give of where automation I think is really powerful. Like when I used to send a crew to a site back in my Siemens days, there was always a day where we needed the guy from Carrier Chillers and the guy from the plumbing company and us all there at the same time to go live with a certain activity. And I reckon about 50% of the time, one of the 3 parties didn't turn up, and the other 2 would have an aborted day. Now, as a project manager, you should have phoned up before, just the day before or the week before. Is everyone on track? Everyone going to be there? Definitely going to be there? And you just don't get around to do it because you're always finding fires. So there's a bunch of stuff that is repetitive and we can take off your hands, and there's a bunch of stuff that is, we'll help you to be a better project manager because we'll do the things you should do, but you just never get round to.
Or you don't do because you hate doing it.
Yes, or or if you're like me, you just hate talking to people on the phone. So.
Okay. So, Nifty's been around for how long now?
We started in July last year, and there's just the two of us.
So your co-founder is also from Ape?
Yeah. So he was one of our guys at Ape.
Okay.
So and part of kind of the deal we put together as a left, he came with me to create Nifty together.
Right.
And we literally kind of left Ape and went to the pub and said, right, we love voice. We love this the kind of general idea of doing something with a digital assistant. What the fuck are we going to do? And
so it's apart from your connection to Ape, it's a completely separate company. It's not like a partially owned by Ape, or
no, they're two completely separate
Okay, so
entities. Yeah.
spin-off almost.
Yeah, you could call that. Yeah, and it was it was took a little while of a bit of discussion for a couple of months of within Ape to kind of figure out exactly what would happen and what we put together as a deal. But I think everyone left very happy with the deal we put together.
You mentioned that you've secured some funding for Nifty.
Yes.
You did an angel round. That was.
Yeah, so in November last year we did an angel round with Perth, well actually two Perth guys and someone in Melbourne.
Investors in Ape by any chance?
No, not at all,
Okay.
no. So it's no secret, Matt McFarlane and Andrew Larson put in here, and there's a guy who's an ex Telstra Ventures guy over in Melbourne.
Get that captured for the funding report.
Yeah.
I'll get the details from you later. Yeah,
kind of kept that quiet for a little while.
Okay. Well, if you don't want it in the report, I didn't hear that. Well, I don't. You didn't mention. I noticed you didn't mention an amount.
We're in US dollars. It's a US entity that we've set up,
Okay.
and it was $115,000 just a bit of covering our costs, covering some flight expenses.
A US entity because you think the biggest market's going to be in the US,
Yes.
and you think your next round of investment might be in the US.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the plan A, I guess.
Yeah. So, are you speaking to other Australian investors already, or is it just?
Casually, but not
Right.
particularly seriously.
So what sort of what sort of runway do you guys have?
Oh, not much. Not much. We're getting through it. International flights are quite expensive.
Yeah.
But we've actually just launched a kind of a small round, and the plan was to kind of do a small round, which I was over in the US a couple of weeks ago, a week and a half ago, no, 2 weeks, sorry, doing that. So we're in discussions at the minute with a few people about that round, but we decided to do a little pre-seed round before kicking off a seed round, and kicking the seed round off another 6 months or so before we would do that, basically to get a bit more validation. But we're kind of halfway there in terms of the validation right now to get straight to the seed round. So
Okay.
we're kind of in a bit of flux at the minute. We may end up having sufficient validation just to go ahead with the seed round.
So you're looking to move across. Your co-founders going with you or staying here?
Staying here, we plan to. We think we'll do the research and development here.
Okay.
I think we can build a great team here in WA. I don't.
So is that you're going to have an Australian subsidiary or?
Yet to be figured out exactly the mechanics, but yeah, I'd expect we'll have an Australian subsidiary that'll do research and development here. We may go fully remote. We haven't finalised that. It would depend on finding the right talent, but I'm a firm believer that here in Perth we do have sufficient really good talent to make a grade business. You don't have to go to Sydney, and you certainly don't have to go to San Fran for it.
Can we go to Q&A?
Do you have one?
Minute?
Yes, look, absolutely.
I was going to ask, even just a really broad one, right? Whether it's Nifty or Ape. What was the biggest challenge you had through that process? What was the biggest challenge that once you resolved that really was a catalyst or proof?
Oh, biggest challenge. I guess the initial biggest challenge was trying to get that initial bit of capital for Ape in the very early days. That was felt certainly the most painful part of the process. There's there's a photograph I've got, and I've done in a previous speech, talk a few years ago, where there's a photograph of me super gluing my trainers together.
I've seen that photo. Yeah.
Before going to a meeting with Lend-Lease. It's like one of the biggest companies in the world, and has me glue my trainers together before I go and have a chat with them. So that was very painful.
That was your fault though, because you'd actually decided that you weren't going to buy a new pair of shoes until you had a particular.
Yes, that is true. Yeah, I had challenged myself that I wouldn't buy any new trainers until that day, and it took away quite a bit longer to get the capital that I expected. And certainly there was that was the bit where there was the most peril. And I think that's something that people forget about startups is there's often quite a bit of personal pain in there. So you've put a bunch of your own money in, you've borrowed a bit of friends and family money, you've forgone having a salary for the last X amount of years to get to that point. And there's a moment in there where if this fails, not only do I fail, but I also owe a crap load of money to people I've got to pay it back to. And that's a very daunting and frightening place to be. So that's probably the kind of, I guess, the lowest point and the biggest challenge to get out of that point and get to the next point. Which
you felt OzApps was very helpful in getting that award, getting the media around that, helping that get social validation for.
I think so, yeah, and also maybe to a certain extent, even the personal confidence to kind of go, look, we are cracking it here. We're doing great. It was a personal kind of achievement, I guess. You also get to spend time with lots of different people, giving you lots of different advice, and frankly, kicking your ass a little bit. Teaches you to get your message right. If you've got a 5-minute pitch on a big stage in front of a lot of people, that's you really don't have time to waffle, which I, as you're now witnessing, quite terrible for.
Yeah, I've got a question, Matt. And hi, we were on a panel together back in 2015. I think.
Yeah.
I really love the way you've focused down on a domain and gone within this area. Siri hasn't got a clue. Because that makes so much sense to me.
Yeah.
Have you found that you've actually got competitors who've had that realization?
We've seen no, not really.
That's
yeah. There's one or two people who are doing NLP in and around trades and construction, but not really.
I mean, they're talking about a domain of knowledge as opposed to a site.
Yes.
This is what's really unique about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, so related question, do investors get that as a distinct difference?
I think so. It's my responsibility to make sure they do understand that. So I think they do. Certainly, that hasn't been when we've had the conversations where you get the kind of bits. I can tell I haven't convinced you about something. It's not really that I'm getting the vibe on. I'm not convincing you on it. Sorry.
Talk a bit about your revenue model. You mentioned that you are providing the app for free, but then how do you generate revenue?
Yeah, great question. We're still figuring that bit out. No, the distinction really is the automation. So we provide a voice application that's completely free for anyone to use as long as you've got an account with one of the partner systems we work with. So the voice app where you can talk to it, ask it questions, log data for you, that's completely free forever. The bit where you, in the app, then sell it to go out and fetch that information from 20 other people, that's the bit you have to pay for. So that's the bit that we'll monetize. We haven't monetized it yet. We've just launched last week the first. We put it into the App Store version where you can now use this automation, and we'll probably look to monetize that in the next couple of months.
And there's no setup costs, just the app. That's it.
Just the app that's free. Yeah, and in fact, there's no setup at all. So one of the things I was really keen from my lesson, some of the things I learned at Ape. At Ape, when we built that, I thought we were skipping a whole bunch of setup costs for people because we were reusing the actual Microsoft Word document people had in their paperwork and reprinting onto that. So at the time, to make a Forms app, there was a whole bunch of configuration in HTML to try and get it to look anything like your existing paperwork. So even though we do that, it's still really hard to get people to spend time setting a system up like that, particularly in construction where people are just constantly firefighting, and particularly if you're selling to kind of say mid-sized companies who don't really have the resources to throw at it. So with Nifty, what we've tried to do from day one is zero setup. So you log in with, you don't even have a password in our system. We use passwords from other systems. It logs in, it goes and fetches the data. It does everything for you. It'll show you how it can work and then gives you the app for free. So no configuration. And that's something we're trying to keep central to the plan. Sorry, I know you. I did see you had earlier. I'm sorry.
So back when you first got into voice, that first little idea, I guess there was a selection of ideas on the table. What can we do from here?
Yep.
And voice was one of those that was chosen. Did you choose it at that point because it was a cool idea and you could do this and you just wanted to tinker around and play and see what cool stuff you could do? Or was there any sort of hypothesis testing around there that told you that people in construction would do this? As you knew at this point, they didn't like talking on the phone, so what makes you think they wanted to talk to an iPad?
Yeah, the talking on the phone bit's more personal to me. I don't like talking on the phone, but actually a lot of business in construction is done purely on the phone. The idea was that it was zero friction to get an answer. So people needed to know how much earth have we moved today if they're an earth moving contractor. And rather than having to navigate to a dashboard, pick the right dash, then tell it to filter for today rather than for the month or for the week. If you could just answer a question, that's the quickest way we could think of answering the problem that customers are presenting to us, which was, we need to know this information and we need to know it like live in the moment. So it just made sense to us. The validation was, let's hack it together, put it out there and see if people use it. And we really did hack it together and put it out there and just see what happens.
Man, I just want to compliment you on really owning the story and how you tell it, which goes to previously, what did you find your own personal biggest area of growth had to be, and then what do you think it has to be to go forward? Yeah,
I'm not sure on the last part yet. I actually think the biggest challenge for me was dropping my ego. Like when I started Ape, when it took, like the bit I said about taking me a year to figure out I was running a startup, I kind of was a little bit thought I was above startup. So really, if I'm really brutally honest with myself, I'd been an executive flying around the world in business class. Thought I was the big I am. I'm not really that arrogant, but that's kind of professionally how I thought of myself. Not in an interpersonal way. I wouldn't be like that in the pub. But so other people who were doing startups and really loved the idea of getting a startup off the ground just was a foreign concept to me, as was entrepreneurialism. I was a construction project manager at heart, a project engineer, and almost to say the word entrepreneurial sounded, I thought of that as a used car salesman rather than an engineer who's pure at heart. Engineers fight the good fight and salesmen sell you vaporware. So it was probably that was the biggest area of growth for me, was dropping that ego, realizing that this is, personally I think now one of the most exciting things you can do with your life is trying to figure out how to run a startup. It's one of the most scary things you can do as well. But yeah, that was my biggest challenge. I think one of the biggest challenges probably going forward is keeping going. It's really hard. So, you know, founder mental health is something that I feel quite passionate about. I feel that founders should be more honest about it. We have to, by default, say everything's fantastic. No, you go to a pitch meeting and you can't have a cold. You know, if you've got a cold, do not fucking sniffle in that 25-minute meeting. Like, you have to be perfect. And that I think is a bit dangerous. And founders should be allowed to be human and falter.
That's even more challenging. We'll probably take this offline.
Yeah.
I think that's even more challenging when you're a B2B.
Yes.
So if you're B2C, it doesn't really matter, but if your client hears you've got you're a little bit down in your game,
yeah.
You've got to be thinking in Australia that's not a welcome message.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's I work in an industry that's one of the highest suicide rates in any industry, construction, and startups are terrible for that as well. So it's an area that is ripe for improvement, for us all to be much more honest about how hard it is, how stressful it is, how some days you can just not know what the fuck to do. and there's challenges you just don't know where to go with. You know, it is hard, and I think having the energy to keep going is one of the big challenges, and not to go a little bit loopy while you're doing it. And the only thing I can think of, frankly, to do that is to be passionate about what it is you're actually doing. So, you know, yeah, I mean, like I fell in love with technology again, to be honest, when I started Nifty. That after you've run a business for a while, you can start to get a little bit jaded, and that's where I kind of think, I listened to a podcast a few years ago where, actually no, it was about a year ago, and the woman on it was talking about never wanted to become the Scooby-Doo ghost. And I really, or the Scooby-Doo villain, I think was what she said. And I don't know if you've heard it. I think it's on the Masters of Scale podcast, which is well worth a listen. Fantastic stuff. What she was basically explaining, and I listened to it at exactly the time when I was leaving Ape, and I thought this is just so true, is that there is a time where you know in Scooby-Doo where the villain is always the janitor who didn't realise the shopping centre's been shut down, and he's just still haunting the place. And I fear that founders, you can become that in your own startup if you're not careful. So for me, I had to have the
Probably you can't, because you would just go off the end of the runway and truly become a ghost.
yeah, well, exactly. So kind of catching that, I think all of these kind of things fit into not having so much ego that you can't actually step out of your own business, was obviously I did, and also being aware that you might not be the best person to run this anymore. And in all honesty, though, the investors at the time, the founder team, weren't telling me that. It was me who had to figure that out and think, I don't think I've got the energy or the passion to really pull this off. But there's people here that do, and they're better to be given the shot to do it.
I heard a similar thing with Quantify, which is another local Wi-Fi tech and building control system.
Yeah.
And it sounds like their founders stepped aside so that a new CEO could come in and
Yeah.
take them to IPO. So I think
Yeah.
it's really good.
We've got a question over here from Paul as well.
Sorry, mate.
Congratulations on your work. I think it's amazing what you're doing, kind of cutting edge. I have a question for you going back to technology. The engine that you're developing,
Yeah.
you're doing it for the construction industry. Do you see the bigger picture? Do you see that something like that could be used for other industries as well in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I do like domain-based businesses because I think you can solve a problem more fully. But I also, you know, at times I've looked at when I've been in a domain-specific business and gone, fuck, if we did a generic forms app, maybe we would have been bigger and better. But yeah, I think if you can take the idea of there is some really hard things to do from our point of view, from a language point of view, that it's very specific to this engineering task or this particular thing, and I can take that information, I can improve it, and then offer a service that does those same things, whether it be for, I don't know, the air industry or for automobiles or any other industry. I think it's possible. For me, I would want to be looking for a similar kind of problem with a similar set of context to then move. And one of the great things, I would very quickly ask myself a question or just kind of make a point, and I think a good lesson I've learned over the last few months was going to San Francisco is one of these areas, one of these things that forces you to level up your ideas. And so 2 weeks ago I had this absolutely amazing meeting with this early stage VC over there. And two things that I found. One is when you look up someone who you're going to have a meeting with and you realise this guy was one of the founding investors in something like Uber and put all these things, and then you're like, fuck, I'm going to go and talk to him about a voice app for construction. How do I level this concept up? And I find that the process of doing that and going to places where these people are extraordinarily either lucky or whatever, but you know that they've had a really interesting journey. How am I going to make mine that interesting to them? So it forces you to level up your concept. Keep kind of going, no, I want to pitch it to here. I want to pitch it up here. Actually, no, I want to pitch it up there. And even when you do that, and then you're halfway through the meeting. So with this guy, it was meant to be a 30-minute meeting. We were in there for an hour and a half. And towards the end of it, he says, what's Act 2? And I thought that was a fantastic question in that. So I can see you're going to get to 100 million with this. That'll be that. Then what do you do? What's Act 2 for this business? And I'm like, fuck. That's a great question because you don't really get asked that very often. And I thought that's part of that kind of, a similar kind of thing to what's Act 2 for Nifty. I don't know yet, but there'll be something. So the chap just
Yeah.
Have you ever crossed paths with Aconex, which is now part of Oracle?
Yeah. So I know Rob and Lee who
Seems like a
owned
bit of a fit there for what's coming on. There's also things like the DuPont stop, which I'm suggesting we bring back in so that any citizen or anybody can call it stop, and it's configured with something like what you have with Aconex and
Yeah.
project planning. So
Yeah.
I might get in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so our theory for our business is connect to as many systems as we can. So we've started with one because we just want to nail it, and we've only got two. We're only two people, but the plan is to connect to as many project management systems on this side and be this system of intelligence, and then connect to other systems on how do we actually communicate with people. So communicate through our app, through SMS, through telephone, through WhatsApp, through Messenger. Basically, wherever you're talking, we want to be able to reach you there and have these conversations between these two systems.
Sure.
Okay. Number one, I've got like a point. Have you met Luke Anir of Safety Culture?
Very, very briefly in the past.
We had him sitting here
We had
a couple
awesome
of months ago.
fireside chats. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of synergy and you guys would really get on.
Mm.
I mean, you seem to have a lot more credibility. I'm trying to imagine a 22-year-old from a Stanford graduate going and pitching to construction guys and having the credibility you have.
Mm.
Whenever I've been in San Francisco, I've struggled like hell with some of the accents over there.
Mm.
So I have the impression, and this is from TV, reality TV, a lot of construction guys are Latino.
Yep.
Does that affect your voice recognition stuff?
Yes. Yeah. So one of our challenges in the foreseeable future is to support Spanish, which our tool sets and everything we use will.
Not just Spanish, but it's English with a Spanish accent. Because I mean, I'm
Yeah.
really, ran in circles with people.
So one is the language, the heavy accent. Yes. Now we actually piggyback on Google and Siri quite a lot for that. So their biggest challenge is giving us is cutting through the accent. So Siri and Google are quite good.
California.
Kind of getting through some accents, but they don't get it right. But we can build into our models mistakes we know. So I'll give you a very simple example that I shared with our customer base a couple of weeks ago. We kept getting a failure report coming through the system where it was saying, there's a thing in construction called an RFI, a request for information, and it kept saying or FI, ORFI.
Is it Brummie?
No, it was Irish, or a FI, and we found out. But then we were able to put that into the model. So now people with an Irish accent can happily say or a FI, and we pick it up.
Yeah, Irish. The Latinos of Europe.
Yeah,
When it comes to construction.
but
Latinos of Europe.
on a more specific note, I did have a conversation with a guy in Florida on that very topic. He was a Mexican guy, very heavily accented, and said, "Oh, can I use this app?" And really, what I said, "How do you get on with Siri?" And he said, "Oh, not all that well, to be honest." And he didn't really say it that way. But I'm not going to try and do his accent. But what you can do with any NLP product is the less you say, the more accurate it is. So there's a high failure rate for a very long sentence, particularly if you've got a heavy accent. There's a lower failure rate on single words or 2 or 3 words. So we support in our app the ability to kind of say a long sentence and then try and figure out your intent. We also support the idea of saying log manpower, and we can get that and all the accents. And then how many people? 8. And you start to then get it through the accent. So not as great an experience if you've got a heavy accent, admittedly, but it does improve as it goes. So, Charlie.
Comparing San Francisco and Perth startup centres, what do you think we're lacking here, or what do you think they're lacking compared to what we've got? I'd like to see some comparisons and contrasts.
We don't have as much urine on the streets or feces or it's an interesting thing. I mean, obviously, there's just the size of the place that there is far bigger over there. One of the challenges in San Francisco is, whilst there's shitloads of VCs out there and there's a bunch of generalist ones, you then got its subsections of, say, early stage VCs. So that breaks it down into a smaller group. And then in that smaller group of early stage VCs, or there's very early stage, And then each one has a very specific theory that competes with each other. So we only do ones that, like I had a pass on a recent round from a guy whose thesis on NLP was basically our whole business plan. Like if you read it, there was a perfect match. But where he got to struggle was it's just, I can't see it quite as big as Uber. And that's one of the strange things. So they're a particular fund in that they only ever put, say, 200 or 300 grand into a business, and they never follow on. So they have to put enough in that business is going to get massively diluted, but it's going to be so big, they still get a kind of, so their equation, instead of a 10 times return, is 100 times return on this 200 grand they put in the early days. So?
We all like that.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a weird thing where I think here we have more, in Australia generally we have people who look for a good deal and don't necessarily have an inflexible thesis on what they will and won't invest in. The other challenge in San Francisco is if you are from Stanford or maybe you hear the stories of people who have an idea or get a check on an idea and all those kind of things. That doesn't happen to anyone who didn't go to Stanford. Yeah. So unless you're a second-time founder of Uber or one of the other very successful startups, shouldn't happen if you were actually the founder of Uber. But no.
Long way.
Sorry.
Apart from
Oh, sorry. There's just.
In Australia, I find it's more who you know than what you know. In San Francisco, is it more what you know?
I'm not. I'm not sure I'd draw much of a distinction. I think they're both. There's similarly that your network you have to work your network as much as you can to get into people, and then you do need to know what you're talking about when you're there. There are, because of the size of it, in San Francisco, there are people that will take cold emails and who don't believe in the referral system, which is one of the things you'll find in Australia is quite powerful here. Is a lot of VCs will not talk to people who don't have a warm referral from somebody within their network. You have to go and work their founders and get through to them. That there is a bunch of people in San Francisco that have realised that's a very flawed idea, and all you ever get is mates of mates. So maybe you're right. Maybe I just said exactly what you just said. I think maybe I agreed with you.
Did you have any views on Google Duplex?
No, I haven't got any experience with it.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
We can continue with questions over drinks. So we might wrap up the Q&A now. What time have we got?
7:20.
Oh, plenty of time. We get kicked out at 8 o'clock, and then if there's still people around who want to keep talking, we go across to, what's the name of the bar again? I always forget.
Refuge.
The Refuge Bar, thank you. And if you could join me in thanking Matt.
Thank you for listening.